Welcome back to Pentapod. On this episode, I talk with Clare Robertson about her upcoming novel, some advanced notes on practical dreaming, which will be out September 2025. Here's a little bit about the book. At Auchterhouse, a mysterious university hidden away in the Scottish Highlands, only the most arcane of subjects are studied, and only excellence will do. Auchter can teach you to speak forgotten languages, walk back in time, remove objects from your dreams, and uncover secrets lost to hearsay and myth. It can also give you back your life. Before the university, Sam Sheridan was depressed, isolated, and institutionalized 3 times before her 18th birthday. The university has given her everything: friends, purpose, a place that finally feels like home, and she knows that she cannot live without it. But then Sam's best friend goes missing, and no one will believe her when she says their charming but secretive professor is to blame. Forced onto a rescue mission that will take her across continents, into the path of a mysterious hitman, and in and out of dreams, Sam will discover exactly how far she will go to protect the ones she loves, and how much she can even trust in her own mind. It was such a pleasure to talk to Clare. I have been following her on Twitter since 2020, and I've been listening to her talk about this book particularly since then. It has been so fantastic to watch her go from ideation process to multiple drafts to finished book to now being self-published. And we talked a lot about that journey. Gosh, we talked about so many different topics in this episode. I will give a slight trigger warning for some mentions of suicidal ideation, mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, and eating disorders in casual conversation in reference to the book itself. So just be wary of those topics. But we really talked about so much. We talked about how Clare's bookish family has shaped her as a writer. We talked about place and main character creation and world building and writing process, but also about hope and healing and rest. And I just really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you guys will too. I'm so excited. This is fun for me too, because I feel like I've been following you on this writing journey for the 4 years that it's been with this story specifically, because I started following you on Twitter in 2020. So I remember you talking about this. So it's so fun to see that it's getting published.
This is such a fun book to debut with, because this is the book that everyone knows me for, and this is the book that I was writing when I sort of started finding my space in the community. So it's the most fun to be for this to be the one, because everyone's hey, I know her.
Yes. No, that's fun. I feel like 2020, Twitter 2020 was a chaotic space, but also a really beautiful time. I feel like many writers found their groove or their writing projects, and so many of them are published now or on the path to publishing, and it is crazy amazing to see. I think about Hayley Dennings, who just published
Beautiful
This
Hayley.
Ravenous Fate. Yes, and Harper Hawthorne, who I talked to in a previous interview about, their story, and it's just fun because it's kind of selfish for me. I'm like, ooh, I get to chat with all these writers that I've been obsessed with their stories for years, and now I get to talk to them about it. So it's very fun for me. I always like to start with asking where you're from and if you feel like where you're from has impacted what you write about in any way.
So it's kind of a tricky one. I am from Oxford in the south of England, in terms of that's where I was born, that's where I grew up. But my mum is actually from upstate New York, and my dad was British, but his dad was in the army, so he moved around all the time. My dad actually grew up in Baghdad. So even though we lived in the UK, basically all my family were in the United States, and all our kind of all my parents' cultural references were very American. They met in the UK, but they lived in the US for years. My dad had lived in the US before meeting my mom. And I think it definitely has informed my writing a lot. I think that I grew up not really feeling at home kind of in my environment, and sort of like always had in my head this idea of like what home sort of would look like. And I think that's a theme that comes up in my work a lot, is this kind of like slight kind of like longing for like a place to rest your bones, which I found in Scotland, which is where I live now. I moved up here for school when I was 18. I'm 26. I'm still here. I met my partner here. Like, but yeah, no, definitely. It's also why you will hear, like, I'm very English, but I will occasionally say like my mom. So you're not hearing things. It's just me.
That's really beautiful. I like the phrase "rest your bones," a place to rest your bones. That's really great. So do you feel like that theme is in everything you write, or in some advanced notes on practical dreaming in particular?
It's definitely in sort of the work that I'm doing a lot at the moment. So yeah, it's in Dreamers. It's in my next book that will come out after Dreamers, particularly. But yeah, it's so our the main character of some advanced notes on practical dreaming, which I will probably slip and call Dreamers because that's just what me and my like critique partners have always called it. She is from the United States. She's from Virginia, which is where my sister now lives, but it's where a lot of my family kind of settled. It's like a place I was like very kind of like a big kind of feature of my like adolescence, is kind of going to visit family in the summer. But she similarly kind of was not at home in her home. When we meet her, she is at grad school in Scotland, and like she is desperately trying to make that a home, and kind of like very much fighting for it to be a home and a place to settle down, even though, you know, graduate school is it's a passing place. It's not a place to stop. You're passing through on the way to somewhere else. And that's kind of a big conflict for her when we meet her, is this like longing for everything that she's found to be permanent when it just can't be.
I like that idea of, you know, you said grad school is something that isn't permanent. It is like it passes, and she's wanting to rest her bones, like you said, somewhere permanent. But that is such an interesting conflict of interest that we all feel, because like you said, nothing is permanent forever. But there is that want to settle into something that you've found that feels safe and good. And yeah, wow. I really like that. Thank you for sharing that.
Right?
Yeah, so with this, you know, you grew up then in Oxford, you said, and then you went to school in Scotland. When did you first know you wanted to write, or do you feel like you've always identified that way?
I was actually thinking about this last night. I can't remember like where the idea came from, or like the moment that I was like, that's what I was going to do. That's what I'm going to do. But I do have a very clear memory of I worked it out. I must have been about 7 years old, and my mom was trying to have like an adult conversation. Like we were just like out in town or something, and I was like tugging on her coat because I was like, "No, Mom, I have something to tell you, and it's so important." And she kind of like, she's like, "Okay, like what is it?" I was like, "I'm gonna be a writer one day." And she kind of looked at me, and my mum is like the nicest person in the world, and she was just like, "That's great, honey. I'm so proud of you." But I am really proud of you. So I've no idea where it came from or like what made me decide that, but I do know that it has always been my whole personality. Like when I announced that my book was coming out, so many people that I like went to school with, who I've not spoken to in years, were like, "Yeah, that's always been." They were like, "That's really cool because you've been talking about that for a decade." I do know that I come from an extremely like bookish family. My family are all huge readers, and I would kind of say my family are all sort of storytellers in their own sort of way. Like I am, as far as I'm aware, the only fiction writer. I've got 4 other siblings, so someone might like come out of the woodwork, but like my sister has been consistently like writing a journal for our entire lives. Like, she has shelves and shelves of diaries, and my mum is the most like, let me sit you down and tell you about, you know, this lady in like her flower arranging group kind of thing. Like, let me tell you the drama. And I think that is storytelling. And you know, we have like lore in my family. We have like the same stories that have to be like hashed out anytime like someone new enters into, like, there's nothing my siblings like more than like someone's partner gets introduced and my brothers are like, have you heard this story of, like, so I think even though I don't remember what it was that made me think I want to do this, like, it seems so natural to me that this very bookish kid from this family where like recounting things is so important would just be like, yeah, of course I'm going to be a storyteller. It's just what we do. I'm just going to write them down. Like,
Yeah. I never looked at it that way. And that is such a good perspective because I am one of those people as well who my family has lore. I
yeah, oh
agree.
yeah,
I've never said it like that, but I'm going to steal that phrase because it's
yeah,
true. Yeah, like whenever someone new comes into the picture, I know when my husband came into the family, I
yeah.
instantly was like, okay, everyone, let's go around, let's tell the big stories. That is such a beautiful way of looking at it too, though, that you came from a bookish family and it seems like in everyone else's unique way, everyone deems storytelling important, whether it's your sister with the journals, which is amazing. So
It's
jealous.
crazy. I know.
That's crazy.
I cannot.
No, and I've tried.
Yeah, no, me too, so much. But she is just like it's easy, like it's nothing. Like, and you just,
Wow.
yeah, no, I know. If she does
That's
ever,
great, though.
it is. But if she does ever decide to start writing fiction, like, we're all out of a job.
Do you think so? Like, were your parents big readers? Were they reading in front of you?
Yeah. Oh my god. Like, so my mom isn't like a huge reader because she doesn't have time. My mom's a lawyer, like, but she
Mm.
loves books. But my dad was a huge reader, like stacks of books everywhere kind of thing, and read to us as kids, and like was just like the most amazing like at reading aloud, like did all the voices.
Oh, fun.
I don't know what a normal time to stop having a bedtime story is, but I suspect that I stopped like really late because like just because it was so fun. My dad was so good at it, and I was really really lucky to like grow up in a really comfortable family. And like my dad particularly, who had grown up not super comfortable, was like, books are the only thing I never want you guys to have to ask for money for. Books aren't for spending your allowance on. Books are just whatever else we're going to have in this house, we're going to have books, kind of thing. And then because there's a really big age gap between me and my siblings, I wasn't only reading kind of the kids' books that were coming out when we were kids, but also the kids' books that they had as well, which I feel like so lucky for. These dying, tattered paperbacks, which I like still remember so clearly. They're definitely like dust now. They were so old when I had them. But like I think that like growing up and someone being like, here is the most important thing I can give you, and it's a book, is just a great thing for kids. Like, I was so lucky.
Yeah. That is really lucky. I love that your dad said, you know, no matter what, we're going to
Yeah.
have access to books
Yeah.
in this house, which is a really great foundation, like you said. And it does solidify in your mind very young then how important storytelling is, which I think, you know, if you're listening to this podcast, you agree that storytelling is important. So that's really great that your parents instilled that in you. Do you feel like there were books then, since you had access to all of these books and stories growing up, that you feel like has defined you now or that you think about fondly?
Howl's Moving Castle, the book, not the film. The film is also great, but I do believe the book needs more justice. Was like an absolute, like, it was such a favorite of all my siblings, that like I like really remember my dad being like, it's time. Like, he had really waited his moment. Like, it was like such an important book for all of us. It just completely gripped me, the magic of it. I believe it was the first book that I kind of encountered that featured something that I still just love now, which is like magic just not being a big deal. Like being like a huge part of the story, but like just being like a normal part of the society in which the story is kind of being carried out. I just love that. I love it as an everyday kind of happenstance, because I just think it adds this kind of like this like richness and possibility of like, what if this story didn't have to be about discovering magic or finding it within yourself? What if it's just there and the story gets to be about something else and the arcs get to be about something else? And I had like the main character of Howl's Moving Castle is, she's so strong, but she's strong in her character. Like she's literally an old woman for most of the book. You know, she's not like a kick-ass kind of character in that way. And I love a kick-ass female heroine. Like the Hunger Games came out when I was 11 years old. Like I love that.
Yes.
But I knew very early, like I was this small weedy kid who was scared of everything. Like I think I had a very sensible and reasonable like assessment of my own abilities and characteristics as a kid. I was like, I will not be going out and getting into any fights, thank you. I have to find another way of getting my way, and it's gonna have to be the force of my personality. And I think seeing that in that book, I would have probably been 7 or 8 years old again. Yeah, I was immediately like, that's me. This is my book. This is everything to me. And I still like, it's still the book that I kind of immediately, I'm like, that's my favorite book. It's the book that I kind of don't buy for people, because if they didn't like it,
yes,
that would be like horrific. But then, you know, if someone does like it, like I recently found out that my cover artist for my book is also a big Howl's Moving Castle fan, and she and I were just like, well, we must work together forever now. Like,
it's soulmates.
It's exactly
Kismet. Yes.
Yeah, Mia, if you're listening to this,
I love that. Shout out. So then, do you feel like you've stayed within those bounds of gravitating towards stories where magic is a constant, even in your adult life? Or what are your kind of go-to genres for books?
As a writer, I do tend to gravitate towards fantasy. I just find it irresistible. And I think in my heart of hearts, because those were the books I loved the most as a kid, I am a fantasy writer. Like I do feel like a very strong sense of like, I want to write like the books that like little Claire would have been like so stoked that we got to write. But at the same time, like as a reader, I actually read more broadly, I think, because I struggle to read within the genre that I'm currently writing. So I'm on a break at the moment, so everything I'm reading is fantasy. But ordinarily I'll pick up anything with prose that I connect with and characters that I like connect with. I love a romance novel. I'll do a little bit of sci-fi as long as I don't have to like pretend that I'm good at math or science.
Amen. Yeah.
Thank you.
I liked my sci-fi without me having to know the science.
I love aliens. I hate physics.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, but I actually find that reading widely and being kind of open to finding influences and inspiration anywhere is actually, that's what I think has been sort of the making of my writing, and just kind of having more of an attitude of like, why do I like that? What about that is moving me? How can I use that? As opposed to strictly being like, well, that's a romance novel and I write fantasy, so that's cool, but unfortunately that has to stay over there. Like, I think that just being open to being a sponge, like being open to anything, and not just books, but video games or music or TV, like anything that I think like that affects you, I think is good material, as long as you kind of have that like even vague understanding of like why it itches your brain good.
Yeah, I definitely am someone who's always analyzing any media I consume from that lens, like you said. Like any books I'm reading, TV shows, video games, if it moves me, I'm always asking that question. What do I love about this? How can I recreate this or use this in some way? And if I don't like something, I'm asking the same questions.
Yeah,
why do
absolutely.
I not like this?
Yeah.
No, that's really great. I like that you're also being able to do that and that you read widely because it is important. I think to be the best writer, have to be a good reader as well.
I think there's a real danger, and I've never written anything that I had to really intensely research, but I always worry that there's a real danger in kind of making your reading about your writing. Like, I think if reading can be something that recharges you and refills your well, instead of something that is directly funneling straight through into the creative process, I think that's great because, like, your brain needs a break.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just be constantly churning out material. I think it's so good to kind of read things and then let it sit for a while and digest it, and like you say, analyze it, and then put it into the writing. It's just good for your brain, I think.
I agree. And especially as someone who, I have a creative writing degree. And I think that's why for a couple years I wasn't writing or
Yeah.
reading because I
Yeah.
was so burnt out at it from an academic level. So I concur. You need to have a good balance of analyzing, but also just reading for fun and allowing your brain to go on the journey the writers want you to go on. With your writing process, then, you said you don't like to read books in the genre, while you're writing, which that makes total sense. So then when you're in that writing process, are you someone who plans everything out in the beginning, or are you more of this pantser?
Ideas will come to me very suddenly, like often in a dream, which sounds way more poetic than it actually is. I just have a very overactive imagination. If there's something that like has consistently really moved me and I'm thinking about it a lot, I think in the process of thinking about it a lot, like my brain will kind of churn up like a little, like just fragment of an idea. And I take quite a while to think that all through. Like once I've had the idea, the rest seems to come quite quickly in terms of characters and like an atmosphere. Often like just random lines from the book will pop into my head and different kind of chapters that I want to do. My first lines tend to come very quickly, but then all that, which is great. And I make a lot of Pinterest boards, I make a lot of playlists, and I get to have like all the fun like discovery process. But unfortunately, I then do have to have like solid outline, because if I don't have a solid outline, nothing is ever getting done. Like I will get stuck somewhere in like the first 5 chapters and then we're never going. I've really tried, because talking to other writers, my critique partner Amy Clarkin, for example, who writes a great series about paranormal investigators in Ireland, is like, she's a complete answer. She's like, I have to wait for the characters to tell me what's going to happen next. And I'm just like, that sounds so cool, man. Like, you sound like an artist. I sound like a lady with a spreadsheet. But I really need the structure, because once I have the structure, and I really do have every chapter like literally plotted out, not necessarily the exact sequence of events within the chapter, but definitely the big beats of every chapter. Once I have that, then I feel safe enough to start the project. I feel like I can just, like, I know what's happening. All I have to do is think about the words. Like, it's my safety net. It makes me feel secure enough to kind of then go on an emotional journey with the book. And then it's also just, I need the dopamine of ticking off each chapter as I go. Like, I need to, like, the concrete proof that I'm making progress. It doesn't have to be the same way every time. Like, some books I've written and I have, like, it's been a very messy first draft, and that's been absolutely fine, because I'm a much better reviser than a drafter. Some books I've written, I've actually had to have like a reasonably perfect first draft to keep going, because the stress of going back to fixing it has stopped me kind of continuing. But the one consistent is my outline. You gotta have it.
I feel like you and I are the same in our processes.
Oh, good.
The whole time I was like, yes, same. It also takes me, I think, a while to ruminate. I don't know. I have to let it kind of marinate. The idea needs time to grow in my mind. And like you said, like I do all the Pinterest boards, the Spotify playlists.
But when it comes down to it, once I'm ready to write, I need an outline. If I don't have an outline, I will never write.
But I actually find it is helpful though, because if I can't outline it fully, then I know I'm not ready yet.
That's a good point.
It has been definitely something I've really realized the last couple of years. Like if I'm ready to write the book, even though it's a bit painful, like when I sit down to write the outline, I can genuinely do it. Chapter 1 to chapter sort of 55, 56 sort of thing. But and it's great because I'm like, okay, I can't, this middle section isn't coming clear to me. Even though I really want to write this book, it's going to have to sit for a while longer. And then when I come back to it, maybe I'll be ready.
Yeah. And so when you're outlining, I like that you have figured out that if you can't outline yet, it's not time to write. That's a really good goalpost for you. Do you outline with a specific, I don't know, there's so many outline structures. I feel like people are always asking that and they always want to know, like, how do you outline? So do you use Save the Cat, 3-act structure? What's your plan?
I do up to a point. So I tend to find a 3-act structure really helpful when I'm kind of starting off, literally just to get me going, kind of. So then I can literally be like, okay, this idea, that's a first act idea, this idea, that's a third act idea. And I will, once I have my full outline done, I will on occasion, I definitely have for the last couple of books I've written, I will go back in with the kind of Save the Cat, just kind of really basic, simple beats, just to be like, okay, yeah, that's my inciting incident. I can't remember if the Save the Cat beats off the top of my head, but that's like, that's about where that should be. That's, and my kind of turn into the third act, that's about where it should be. But that is more for my sort of like peace of mind kind of thing, because I used to be the pacing of my books and the plotting of my books is the thing that I've had to work the most on. So it's more for my sort of peace of mind of like, okay, you've not fallen into your old traps of setting things up for too long sort of thing. But I don't find kind of any one method like is particular, like my like rigid method that I like must stick to. But that's just because I have quite a sort of fickle brain. I had quite a bad burnout period in sort of probably about 2022 thereabouts, which I've like totally recovered from now, but I think my brain is kind of very resistant now to any kind of like, we must do things this way. Like I've got to, even though I do need my outline, within my outline, I need to sort of feel a little able to kind of approach things from any kind of angle. I've got to feel like I've got wiggle room, otherwise I just start to kind of get more panicky, or it starts to feel too much like work. And it is work. I take my writing incredibly seriously, and I get really annoyed when people treat my writing or anyone's writing like it's not writing, but like it's not writing, like it's not work. But it has to be enriching as well, kind of thing. But I do think that when people are kind of like, how do I outline, how do I plot, I think you will innately know when you are reading something, if it's the Save the Cat book, or if it's one of the other really big ones that gets passed around in the writing community, like the Stephen King book kind of thing. I think you will innately know if you vibe with it, if it feels correct for your brain. And if you do, embrace it, open arms, beautiful. And if you don't, that's also absolutely fine. I think it has to work for you and for your brain, because it's your book.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. That's something I try to talk about on the channel, is that there isn't one way to write a book. And I think a lot of people are looking for that. I mean, we all are looking for a quick fix and a get a book done quick scheme, if you will, in the writing world. But it's true. I like that you kind of talked through that process. I think it's good for people to hear that it's important to stay fluid. Unless if you are someone who needs like rigid structure, and then if you know that, then like you said, you'll be able to figure out which one works for you, but to stay true to yourself, I feel like in the writing process is super important. I think that's really great. For this then, so it seems like you had like a pretty fluid of kind of finding, you know, the story and the outline, and you were going through this writing process, but you said you had a burnout period in 2022. I was wondering if you'd be willing to kind of talk about that. I feel like that's common in the writer's world, and, you know, having writer's block, writer's burnout. How did you overcome that? How did you get through that?
I think it's such like a classic tale of sort of probably having taken on too much. So in 2022, I was querying some advanced notes on practical dreaming, and I was in my first year of grad school, and I was also trying to write a new book because I'd really taken to heart that, like, write while you wait, you know, while you're querying one, you should be working on the next one, which I don't think is bad advice, and I don't even think it was bad advice for me. But I think probably a necessary caveat would be write while you wait, unless you are also having to learn an entirely new style of academic writing, and you're having an emotionally complicated querying process, and you're also planning a wedding. Maybe just don't. I know. I know. Querying Dreamers was such a challenging experience. I had so many, like, this is great, but, or like, I love this, unfortunately. And I think that there is more advice nowadays. It's only been 2 years, but it's amazing how much things can move on. I think there has definitely been a shift in the community to be more, querying is very difficult, find your people, find your outlets. Way more kind of agents saying, oh my god, querying is heinous, like it's the only way to do it, but even we think it's awful, especially on Twitter. And agents, or even sometimes bigger authors, kind of being like, well, if you can't handle querying, then you can't handle publishing. And I think the emotional strain of that, plus everything else I was trying to do, plus writing a new book, just completely, I was putting out so much emotion and so much energy and so much work, and I was not taking any back in, really. And I was just finding that even though I was writing a book I was really excited about, a kind of way into it that I was really excited about, I sent something like 5 chapters off to a friend who was like, this is such a great start, I'm so excited to see more. And then I didn't really write again until January of 2023. So I've started this book in January of 2022, and then stopped writing probably in February, and not written again for nearly a year. Just every time I tried, I kind of really, it just would be like consumed by self-doubt. And then I also just found even just the thought of sitting down and writing just filled me with kind of exhaustion and anxiety. And it was kind of, that burnout was what started me on my process of becoming an indie or a self-published author instead of a traditionally published author, because I did also have a realization of, like, not only am I not enjoying this process, I think I also just don't want an agent. But that sounds, you know, like, oh, I had this realization. That took years to come, kind of thing. But yeah, and the only way for me to recover from burnout, and I think possibly the only way that there really is I had to rest my body and my brain. And I probably read more in 2022 than I had in years. I played a lot of video games. I was pregnant with my son for the latter kind of few months of 2022. And I think that enforced rest was actually probably because I had really bad morning sickness, which was really hard to find a silver lining of at the time. But that enforced rest actually probably was in the end the thing that helped me out of it, because I just needed a break. And I think if I had given myself a small break in between finishing Dreamers, querying it, starting something new, if I'd just taken a small, like, a month, I think I would have probably been fine, but I didn't. And in the end, my brain was just like, there's too much going on. I'm too tired. Yeah, it was really hard. It was really difficult. I actually had to just completely take a break from the writing community in general because I felt like such a failure. And also, I think I felt that I didn't deserve to be burned out because I was like, oh, you're not how can you be burned out? Like, you're not even a full-time author. Like, you're still just writing for yourself, which is absolute rubbish.
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously anyone at any level can experience burnout. And I think there's such a toxic like work culture in the writing community sometimes that doesn't help. But rest is magic. It genuinely is, and it sounds so unhelpful and so boring, but genuinely just taking a break can do wonders.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I thank you for being so candid about that. I think it is important for other people to hear, like you said, that anyone can burn out doing any creative activity at any time, and why rest is so important. And being able, like you said in the beginning, to consume media without worry or stress is so important for our process as well, to refill that creative cup so that we aren't just burning the candle at both ends. So I think that's really, really important. I do feel like it is important for people to hear those stories. So thank you for sharing that, because it happens. And I like that the advice is to just rest, because I don't think we take rest seriously enough as a creative community. And even though, like you said, writing is work and we care about our work, it's important to make sure we are well rested in order to have the best work that we can. And at the end of 2022, you said you were pregnant with your son.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and you're a mom, and I think that's amazing and beautiful. And I'm always so curious because as someone who, I got married last year, and my husband and I are potentially embarking on that journey at some point. And I'm always curious, how has writing been being a mom, and how does that look for you? I feel like that adds a whole other aspect of needing rest and, sanity. So how are you doing with that?
I mean, I think probably like anything that I say like does need to be taken into context of like, I am extremely lucky to be, I'm a work from home, stay at home mum, but I work for myself. So I'm, really able to fit everything around like my two big things, which are my son and my writing. And I'm able to do that because I have a partner that works, and also because we have, really involved family really close by. My partner's family live maybe 20 minutes away. My son goes to his grandparents every week for a full day, and like just a lot of people just do not have that. So like I do definitely need to like note that before saying anything else, because I have been really lucky that I have been pretty able to fit my writing in around my son. Like when he was extremely small, he would not sleep anywhere except on your chest, which is so common for newborns.
Yeah.
My partner and I would split the nights so that we were both still getting a good amount of sleep, but that still had me up at, I took the second half of the night, so I'd be up at 3 a.m. until like on solo parent duty until probably about 8, 9 a.m. when my son was very small. And when they're really small, you can't like, they so warn you about like falling asleep holding them. It's just not safe. Yeah. So you got to do something to occupy your brain. And so I would write at 3 a.m. on my cell phone because I couldn't work out how to hold a baby and do my laptop kind of thing. I tried with a Bluetooth keyboard, but then I would consistently like leave my glasses somewhere so I couldn't see the screen. Anyway, so I'd be writing on Google Docs on my phone, holding this newborn baby, which was a lifeline. I think so many people really kind of lose themselves in the newborn phase, and I had this thing that's always been mine and always been how something I orient myself around, which is my writing. And I'm so lucky, and I would literally like just in those early months just write any opportunity. Like if he fell asleep on the bus, I would write on my phone on the bus kind of thing. I now do most of my writing during his nap time. I'm really lucky that I because so much of my process is very internal, I'll be pushing this kid on the swing and thinking like, well, okay, so this, I've worked out why that's not working. And if I do this instead, regularly, like we'll be pushing back from the park and I'll be like, okay, where did I leave that narrative off? Where am I picking it up? So by the time that he takes his nap in the middle of the day for a couple of hours, and I will literally put him down in his cot, and I will be like, the room that I'm in right now is next door to his nursery, and it's the room where the big computer is, and I am like the wind in here to get everything down. And for me, that really works. Like for me, the time pressure is actually super helpful because I just sit down and I get on with it, kind of thing. Because I know that in 2 hours this kid's gonna wake up and he's gonna want a grilled cheese. Like there's no two ways about it. And I also am finding that, there's other real positives. I was literally thinking this morning, like I was having a bit of a self-doubt moment, because we all have big self-doubt moments. It's so hard not to. And I was feeling a little bit just a little bit worried about the book or whatever. And then I just literally looked directly to my left, and my kid is like leaning back in his chair in his pajamas. He's 18 months old, so picture a small, gorgeous, round little thing. Just leaning back in his chair in his pajamas, eating his cinnamon toast and like dipping it in his yogurt. And like just so happy, so content. He's watching the cat, watching the birds, so chilled, so happy. And I was like, oh no, that kid's got he's got the right idea. Like it's not that deep. Life is good. Like the dipping his cinnamon toast into his yogurt is horrifying, but he's worked out what makes him happy and he's doing it. And like,
yes,
because kids are like that. They're in the moment. They they're still at the very, kind of actually genuinely really helpful. Like, are my basic needs met? Tick. Did I get to go and splash in some puddles today? Tick. Beautiful. Couldn't have asked for more. And that is like actually, being around that 24/7 is actually really helping me find my way into a much healthier mindset. Oh, who cares if that person like didn't put my book on their like most anticipated books of 2025 list. I have my coffee. We're gonna go to the park today. The sun is shining. Not to be like people are dying, Kim, but like like life is good. It's not that it's not that tough. And so I found that really helpful. Obviously, there's a lot of things that are hard. My kid does not sleep through the night, so I am exhausted all the time. And having to like write and promote a book when you've had 3 hours of sleep is a unique challenge.
Yeah.
And if I ever say anything on social media that is truly unhinged, remember that I haven't slept.
That's a great disclaimer.
I try and say it like once a month on some platform or another. 5 times in the last 18 months I've slept through the night.
You're finding the silver lining, like you said, of, okay, this is a stressful time. You're learning a whole new schedule and still trying to find time for you, which is really great and important. Not everyone has that ability or is able to figure out what they want to be doing and how they should be taking time for themselves. So I love that you've been able to find those moments, like writing while holding your son at 3 a.m, or, making this a priority. That's really great. I love that you've done that. I'm very excited to talk about some advanced notes on practical dreaming because, like I said, I feel like following this story for years or seeing you post about it. And I was so excited. I had a feeling when you started posting, you were like, I have big news and I have this countdown. I was like, it better be what I think it is. And it was. And I was so, so happy. And you said that, you get a lot of your ideas from dreaming, which I think is funny given the story.
I know.
Did this idea come from a dream, or how did you even get this magnificent, beautiful idea for the story?
Thank you so much. Actually, weirdly enough, this is probably my only book idea I've ever had that I don't believe like did come from a dream. I've always been like a crazy, vivid, lucid dreamer ever since I was a little kid. But this one was more of just a more natural kind of things coming together. Like in that big summer of 2020 that we were talking about earlier, I had just graduated from my undergrad I was really lucky to be able to take some time out because who was finding a job in 2020?
Yeah.
That's what I would like to know. I read Leigh Bardugo's Ninth House, which was probably my first like dark academia book, and obviously it was so huge, and I just loved the university setting. Like I said, I grew up in Oxford. My dad did actually work at the university, so I kind of grew up in that, like, not just academia, but like old-fashioned academia until I was about 13 and my parents split up. Like, that was like my life. Like, that was the background I was growing up in. So there was that. And I watched, I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show The Magicians.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I watched that. I read the books it was based on. And then the third thing was I read, and this has really nothing to do with the genre of the book. Talk about finding like inspiration everywhere. I read Hank Green's, I think it's An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, his novel, which is actually genuinely very good. But it's so, I say this with respect to all of our internet dad, like, it's so nerdy. It's so like specifically his. It's so like, you could make people watch a Vlog Brothers video and then like pick a book out of 3 books and they would pick that one was Hank Green's. And I think the 3 things really came together in my mind is that I wanted to write something in this dark academia setting. I really liked the way The Magicians, the books, and then the first season of the TV series like kind of created a world that was fantastical and alluring, but genuinely very dangerous. And then the third thing was like, I wanted to write a book that felt uniquely mine in the same way that Hank Green's book had done. I think that was something that I felt up until that point had been really missing from my writing. I'd more been writing like very loving, but like more like interpretations of other people's work, because that's what you do when you're learning to write books. And I was like, I want to write the book that feels like my book. And so that was the summer of 2020 that I had that just like initial like idea, plan, whatever. And then just then for the next little while, I just kind of just kept picking up bits and bobs, you know, kind of seeing things elsewhere in life and being like, that's going to be great for my dark academia book. There's that Twitter meme that goes around quite a lot. I talked about this recently, which is just like a footnote and it said like, this occurred to me in a dream or something like that. And I was like, imagine being able to cite, like genuinely cite that. So that went straight in there. And then it just kept on picking up bits and bits and bits and bits until it had become a full-fledged idea. But I will say that the book that it is now and the book that it was then are quite different, but only because I was still like a really baby writer then. Like, I'd only completed a draft for the first time in my entire life, like in 2020, like literally that year. I'd not been trying for that. Like, I'd had these years of being like, I'm going to be a writer one day if I ever write something. Like, and so it's taken the 4 years of really working hard on my craft and also getting a bit more big and brave about what I like will allow myself to write about, and in terms of like what I'm comfortable with like the eventual audience of the book seeing me write about, which was a big problem I had for a long time. But yeah, that was a very organic, natural process, that book.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that you talked about Ninth House. Ninth House is one of my favorite books ever. And
so good. The second one also so good.
So good. And I also do love that this book is dark academia, because I feel like, you know, we talked a little bit about traditional publishing and queering, and it is so funny because 2020 dark academia like really started to boom, and I was obsessed. And I'm sad because publishing always does this. They give us a great trend and they give us all that we want. And then I'm always like, but I want more. And of course, like dark academia is like half blacklisted, I feel like now, for certain agents. So I love that self-publishing gives writers the path to publish whatever they want, whenever they want, because it's like the people want more dark academia, please. And I'm people. I want more.
Well, the thing is that it's not just you. Like when I was querying, I think like there's many reasons I ended up self-publishing, but certainly a big catalyst was the querying experience I had. And the thing I found really hard to reckon with was I was having agents be like, you are very talented, this book is good, but I can't sell it. And then people on Twitter be like, give me your book. I want to read your book. I don't have the biggest following, and I'm not saying this would translate to like actual numbers, but I can give you some names.
Right.
Some of them are industry professionals. Like, and it was just that kind of that feeling of like somehow having missed a trend that had only just happened it just broke my brain a little bit. I think I was like, what do you mean we're done?
Right.
It's been a year.
I know. Yeah, and when looking at how you were describing this book, I saw that you listed it as dark academia, fantasy with elements of horror. And again, love that. I do think that self-publishing has opened up avenues for genre blending that we don't get to see in traditional publishing as much, because a lot of agents or publishers, which is fair to them, they're unsure how to market it with multiple genres or multiple taglines that you can associate with. But how did that come about? Like, I'm so interested in like the horror element that is in this book, because I know that you also mentioned you were drawn to like the magicians that had this fantastical world that was genuinely dangerous. So how did that play out in like the horror elements for this book?
Yeah, no, and I mean, I do also like, I really agree with you. Like, I'm saying that I found my querying process frustrating. Like, I think agents are the hardest working people in the industry, and I respect the hell out of like the inevitable fact that publishing is a business. Like, as annoying as it was for me personally, I'm also just like, that's just how it goes though. Like, but yeah, no, so in terms of genre blending, I think it began with a sort of kind of tentativeness to just straight up describe the book as fantasy, although it is, because it's a book where magic is like extremely important to the story, but it's not a book about magic. It really is about Sam's, the kind of the two prongs of Sam's kind of personal journey, and then Sam's like very practical journey of her best friend is missing, she needs her best friend back, kind of thing. Magic is a current that weaves throughout that story, and it's a huge part of the world, but it's not I wouldn't necessarily call it a plot. Like, the magic is at no point kind of like a real kind of like, I think the thing is that at no point in this book do we sit down and go like, here is the magic, here is the MacGuffin, here is the, we need to do the X to get the Y kind of thing, which actually is completely fine. Tons of fantasy books don't have that, but it can be something that people really expect coming into a fantasy novel. You know, they want the plot line where your character is a witch and she discovers she's a witch, and then she discovers her powers and she has her training montage and she goes and she defeats the big bad. And I am in no way denigrating that, the traditional hero's journey, because I think it's phenomenal. Give me 15. But it's not what happens in this book. So I wanted to always make sure that I'm not strictly describing it as fantasy, just to help people set their expectations. And then the horror element of it as well, like, I think that the interplay between horror and depictions of mental health and mental illness is so rich. And this is a book that is in many ways about the main character's experiences with her mental illness. And so the more I kind of indulged the horror elements, the richer the book just became on the whole. The tension between something that's trying to kill you and a character who has at times not been sure about living is, I think, really is like, while it's also very tragic and very sad, like, I think it's a very exciting place I think it offers the reader a lot to kind of really grasp hold of, really kind of get into, really kind of excite their emotions. And I also, despite being a huge scaredy cat, I just really like it when things get spooky. Like, I really like a messed up forest or things bleeding that should not be bleeding. Like, you know, I really gravitate towards some haunting imagery.
I relate to that so much as someone who's like the biggest scaredy cat ever. Like, I don't want to watch a horror movie, but for some reason in book form,
absolutely,
I love it. And I was recently talking to Rachel Kitch, who's a horror author, who talked about how this new era of horror is more introspective, is more intellectual, not like just jump scares and scaring you for scaring's sake. And I feel like you had an extension of that conversation. I saw that you posted a reel that I actually re-put on my story because I was like, yes, a million times. Yes. Where you used the great I lied, put your clothes back on trend, which I'm loving that trend. You put in there something along the lines of hope is as integral to horror novels as fear is, which is beautiful and true. And you were just talking about that, you know, tension even between Sam, the main character, and what they're going through and something trying to kill her. And there's just a lot there. Do you want to talk about how that kind of relates to Dreamers?
Well, yeah, so I think, you know, if you're like inherent in the desire to run away from something is the hope that you will get away. When we meet Sam, she is 5 years post having to have been hospitalized. She has at times incredibly severe anxiety and depression. Should say at this point, like, Sam is not based on me, but I am a person who has struggled badly with my mental health, especially as a teenager. So even though like her struggles are not like my struggles, I had an eating disorder, she has anxiety and depression, like she is very like, it's something that's very close to my heart. And yeah, inherent, like I say, inherent in running away is the hope that you will get away. And when I was a trainee therapist for 3.5 years. Like a recurring theme I would read in a lot of literature is people who had kind of survived being in a really dark place. A really common thing is people would kind of have had like a near death experience, like, you know, like a car crash or something, and almost been relieved because they realized that they wanted to survive it. And that is a huge part, without getting into spoilers, of Sam's emotional journey in Dreamers, a book which I feel like I need to say right now has a lot of jokes and is fun. Mm-hmm. It just also has a lot of darkness in it too. Like the discovery that she wants to survive the encounters she's having, like that she wants to, not just that she wants to rescue her friend, is like a huge part of the emotional journey of Dreamers. It's a book about recovery and how difficult it is to hold hope for ourselves, but how we can find hope for ourselves in the hope that we hold for other people. And it's a book about surviving, and horror often, not always, but often is a genre about surviving. It's about what would you do to survive, like inherent in, I'm really enjoying the word inherent, aren't I? But you know, fundamental to a terrifying situation is the possibility that you'll survive it, and that by surviving it you'll have the tools to survive it. Again, I think I'm very interested in surviving as a repeat process, and about how we're always, every experience we go to is giving us the tools to get through another experience in the future. And it was genuinely really moving to write a character that is getting stronger and stronger as the book goes on, even though she kind of like materially gains nothing, but she just, because she is going through her journey of growth, and because she's healing as she does it, even if she doesn't realize, is getting stronger. And kind of there's so much hope in that. And I think you can have all of that while still also having like genuinely terrifying, hopefully, scenarios. I hope it scares you just a little bit. Like, I'm not promising like the worst terror you've ever had, but I hope you're a little rattled.
Yeah. And with Sam, I like how you've been describing Sam as someone who's gone through a lot. They get stronger as the book goes on, which is so different from the kick-ass heroine that we talked about before. But I love that because I also relate. Like, I would never talk back to people in the way that these kick-ass heroines talk back. And I'm always like, you go, you tell them. But I love also these female main characters who are allowed to be a little messy and a little more timid and find strength in different ways, which is really beautiful. But what did character creation look like for Sam? How did Sam come to be in this world? Or I guess, like, what came first? Did the world come first, or did Sam come first?
The world came first. House, the setting, and the kind of magic system came first. I knew that I wanted to write a main character that kind of like has jokes, like, and I wanted to write a main character who kind of felt like someone you would meet, felt like kind of like a girl next door. Felt like she could be like here chatting with you and me. Like, I just knew very early on that I wanted her to feel cynical and to kind of make light of things, purely because that's like a character I hadn't written before. Originally, I wanted Sam to be very fun, but she had no arc, and the problem with the early drafts was the world was so engaging, but it was falling flat. There was no real urgency because Sam herself wasn't really. Her main personality trait was she loved her friends, which is a great personality trait to have, but it doesn't sustain you for, 95,000 words. Her anxiety came very naturally in just kind of the second or third draft. I think that I hadn't even kind of come to the point yet of being like, okay, we have to fix this character. I was literally just like messing around with a chapter kind of almost 2/3 of the way through the book when I was in the second draft, and just kind of being like, oh, something has to happen here. And just something in my brain said, what if Sam had a panic attack? And that, I have had so many panic attacks in my life. And that just kind of, something immediately in my brain was like, yes, like that feels right for this story. And then I just kept building and building and building. And I think Sam got more and more backstory and became messier and messier the braver I became to write a character that maybe wouldn't be. I think she's super likable. I think some people will probably find her really annoying at the beginning of the book. The less I cared about that, the richer she became as a character, and the richer the whole book became. And something that I love about the final draft of this book is you can see me becoming more open and being like, I actually really don't care if someone that I know in my personal life reads this book and is like, Claire, are you that? Like, have you been that unwell? Like, I no longer care. And that has only made my work stronger. And the great thing about essentially being your own boss as an indie author is I can explicitly say on page, this character has depression. This character has a history of self-destructive behavior. As long as I put appropriate trigger warnings, and as long as people know, as long as people are prepared for what they're going to read, it may put some people off the book, but it may also be this thing that causes some people to be like, oh, that character's like me then. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a character I could find myself in. And it's certainly, like, Sam is so messy, and she makes poor choices, but she's so human. And I almost feel about her as if she were a real person at this point. And so do my friends. Like, I regularly get messages from people being like, I'm really proud of Sam. Not you for writing her. I'm just proud of Sam. And I'm also very proud of her. She feels very very real to me. It feels very strange that this is, in many ways, the last time that I will be spending time with her. It's really a very strange headspace to be in.
I like that she evolved as well throughout different drafts. I think at least me as an early writer and some other early writers have this notion that we have our characters completely figured out at the beginning of the book.
Oh my God.
And that is not my style. So it is comforting to hear that Sam went through evolutions throughout the drafting and revision phases. And I mean, that's a big change to make too, to realize like, okay, my main character maybe isn't having the agency that they need in the story. They're getting kind of carried through with this amazing world, but being able to realize that and then change it, that's a big change. So I'm proud of you too, and Sam, for realizing that change and then, yeah, not being afraid to make her as rich as possible by allowing her to be messy and vulnerable and maybe not likable, but like you said, super relatable and really human. That's a really cool evolution that Sam was able to go through. And I'm sure does, that is what the story is all about, are those character arcs within a super cool, amazing world and magic system, which I love. And you said the world came to you first, which is great. I feel the same. I feel like my world or magic system comes first before the characters. It seems like that always has been strong in the drafts then, this like knowledge of the world. So what is the world building process like for you? And specifically with this world?
I'm actually not a very good world builder. I don't do any of the really like thorough, like kind of thinking everything through. I've never done a world building questionnaire in my life.
Me either.
And I do like kind of dread the day because I would love to write like a proper big epic fantasy book one day, and I'm like, oh, you probably are gonna have to do it one day. But the magic came to me very quickly. Love books and TV where magic is treated almost as a science, or not even necessarily as a science, but like a kind of a structured, rule-bound kind of something that can kind of be theorized about as opposed to just sort of a kind of amorphous, wild force. And so the idea of doing something like that came to me very quickly again, I think, from having seen The Magician. And then Octa House, the university, it's a university of the arcane, so it's grad school, but you get to learn cool and awful and bad magic thing. That came to me super quickly, as well as I often set a lot of my work in the Scottish Highlands. As someone who lives in Scotland, who's lived here for 8 years now. It's just, I mean, I'm definitely not alone in just finding that landscape so inspiring and so beautiful. And I think I just I remember sitting down and being like, okay, this university needs a name and we need to work out like the basic principles. So I worked out that it's not a place you apply to, it's like they find you. People there are always kind of on the lookout for young people who might have the right kind of brain for learning this stuff. So one of my favorite facts about like the core crew of Dreamers is like Sam was discovered by Octa because of some notes in her medical file, and one of her friends was discovered because of like an essay that they wrote in their college applications, and one of them was discovered through an Instagram caption. Like it's a very kind of magic sitting along the real world kind of thing. And I knew that even though we don't spend kind of time with it, I knew that I didn't want practical dreaming, which is what our characters study, to be the only thing that you learned there. I really wanted there to be a feel that this is every kind of scene that you, or every moment that you spend with the characters in Octa House, I want you to have the sense that there's, hundreds of other conversations going on at the same time. Like, I spend a lot of time kind of trying to make it clear that as Sam is in one place doing one thing, she's walking past like classrooms full of people going about their daily lives kind of thing. I wanted it to feel, I think when I'm world building, I'm realizing even as I speak, I focus on what I want things to feel like, and then I let the small details fill themselves out in the draft. I think that I am someone who, like, if I let myself get bogged down with the fine descriptive details, I could be there forever and never actually get to a draft, because like, you know, I always really liked the character creation bit of The Sims best, like the
Yes.
you know, like that just like, who's this person going to be and what are they going to look like, what's this place going to be like, that's what I liked the most. So I think I'm just like, I do as little world building as possible up front so that I don't get lost in that process.
Mm-hmm. Everything you're saying, I'm like, me too. I feel like we are kindred spirits in how we approach writing and planning, because I'm like, yes, same. I've never filled out a world building questionnaire because if I spend too much time on it, like you said, I will never get to draft one. I just won't.
No. Yeah.
And I will get bogged down in the details. And I definitely do my best work with writing or like revisions. And you said that you feel very comfortable as well doing revisions. And
yeah.
I'd love to know what that revision process looks like for you and how many drafts did Dreamers go through?
So Dreamers is on its 5th draft now, which is not that many compared to some published books, but only just because I like the gap between like, you know, draft 1 and draft 2, like the journey that has to go on before I'll be like, okay, this is fully a separate draft now, is quite long. So for me, I tend to, not always, as I said earlier, but in general, when I'm kind of at my best, like when the writing's going well, when my kind of like confidence about it is at its highest, I will just, as I'm drafting, do my level best to, honestly, I don't even, unless I literally just happen to be staring right at it, I don't even fix like a spelling mistake kind of thing. I just leave it all in the draft, and any uneasiness or any ideas that come to me and as I'm drafting, or any like brainwaves about how to fix a problem I had earlier, I literally just write them down. I have a notebook for every draft. No, not for every draft, that would be crazy. For every book. And I just write them down, and when I get to the end of a draft, my early drafts no one sees. Those are for me alone. Literally because they don't make sense.
Yeah.
It's not me being secretive. They're barely English. For me, the most important thing is just to get, once I've gotten to the end of the first draft, I can do anything. Like, I've got the framework, I've been on the journey, like, I'm fine. And I will get to the end of a draft. I will take a couple weeks of just literally not doing it, having anything to do with the book. Then I'll look at my notes. I will make a new playlist for kind of what is the vibe that I'm feeling with this book now, kind of thing. Sometimes it's basically identical to the original playlist, sometimes it's very, very different. And then I will, as I go, I will, you know, clean up the grammar, polish the writing, and then I just have like, I'll know kind of from my notes and just kind of from my own kind of new understanding of the book, know if like a chapter can stay and just needs an edit, or if it needs to be rewritten. And I can tend to then work quite quickly through the draft. And then when I get to the end of that draft, I'll probably still have some more notes, but then I will leave those until after reader feedback. And then basically, once I have a draft that is, I think, kind of, that I'm happy for other people to read it, again, in terms of literal, is it legible? And then, do I feel like it is enough the story that I'm trying to tell, that people are going to understand that, and be able to help me tell the story that I'm trying to tell? I am now really lucky that I have my partner who reads all my drafts, and then 3 friends who read everything that I write, and I will get my books out to them as quickly as possible, because to be honest, they're all a lot smarter than I am. And if they just, the outside perspective I find so helpful and so confidence giving as well. And then, so I'd say I probably do 2 drafts on my own, and then will continue to redraft until I feel happy with it, and until I'm getting consistently getting the reader feedback that I would hope to get. And I will often try and bring in a different external reader on each draft, depending on who wants to read it and who's available, that I have like a good enough relationship with and rapport with and kind of level of trust. And you can definitely over tinker with a book, I think, and overcook it. And I think you have to accept that there's, and I find this terrifying, but you have to accept the point that like you will probably never be done.
Mm-hmm.
Like there probably will always be things that you think, oh, I actually could have done that better, but at some point you just have to let it go.
Yeah. That is one of the hardest parts, is just being able to let a draft go or a book go and just know when it is, like you said, when it's all you can do and you don't want it to overcook. I'm going to bring up another reel because I repost all of your reels on
Do you actually?
Instagram. Yeah, I love them. They are
I
so
never
good.
noticed.
Always posting your reels on my story because I'm like, yes, 100,000%.
Aww.
And I really love this one. I love, like, I think my favorite part of reading books is the themes and what writers are trying to say. And you've said that quite a bit, actually, just in the revising process. Like, is my story trying to say what I wanted to say? And you posted a reel saying, like, POV, you've been the crazy girlfriend, the sick friend, and the hysterical young mother. You got kicked out of class as a teen for crying because your dad was dying, and more than one doctor has called you attention seeking when you asked for help. And then you shared this brilliantly written, like literally me reading it, chills, snippet that really encompassed a lot of like female rage, but it was like a quiet, delicate rage. And it seems like, just in general, female rage has kind of been a theme in a lot of media in the last couple of years. And I love that female rage is getting its spotlight that it deserves. But it feels like it is such a current through Dreamers as well a bit. And I'd love to hear you talk more about that.
I think that I totally agree. I think it's becoming more and more kind of prevalent in modern media. I love it as well. I think like obviously female rage has been such just a prevalent feeling throughout history. I think what we have a lot at the moment is a very specific kind of media where young women and people who identify as women or as femme, or who grew up kind of being socialized as women. We all grew up, who are kind of in our like mid to late 20s, early 30s. We all grew up in the kind of cool girl era where it's like, nothing bothers you. You are so cool. You are so chill. You have never had an angry feeling in your entire life because men don't like women who have big feelings. That's not pretty. Crying's not pretty. And who have kind of had that really toxic mindset kind of thrust on them in their early adolescence, grown up with it, tried their best to internalize it, and are now kind of, as they age, as they mature, I think one of the really great things about becoming an adult is that you socialize with other adults, not just adults who are your age, but adults who are 10, 20, 30 years older than you, which you don't do as an adolescent. So you get access to people being like, oh, really? That doesn't piss you off? Like, kind of thing, And you start talking to your mother more and like discovering that the things that you went through, she went through, and it builds and builds and builds. And I think so many people our age are now like just at the point where they've just unlearned a lot of things. And so it's really coming out in the work they're creating. I think in Dreamers, it's a particular, like, there's a particular kind of way that you get put into a very little box when you're a person with a mental illness, and particularly a person presenting as female, as with a mental illness, where you are really expected to be like, the only way of being sick in a woman is to be like very pretty, very dainty, very demure. Sorry, I can
very mindful,
but very mindful. You cry, but you cry really pretty, and you're like ill, but in a like quirky, I can fix her way. And if you can't be fixed, then you have to be tragic. But you certainly can't struggle visibly, and you cannot be struggling in your recovery. And that pressure is a pressure that Sam has felt. It's a pressure that she has kind of failed to meet, she feels the stigma of that, and she feels the stigma of being an unwell woman in academia, which is still very male dominated in the real world, and it's still very male dominated in Dreamers. And she's aware of how easily she is dismissed and is dismissible. And when we meet her, there is just something building and building and building in her that has been building in her whole life, that she has been allowing to eat away at her. But we meet her at a breaking point, and you can only let something eat away at you for so long until you physically cannot hold it in anymore. And when it comes out, it can come out in all kinds of different ways. And in Sam, it comes out as a rage, but a very, I think female rage is very destructive in a purifying way. It's a dismantling of systems, whereas I think a masculine rage is a dismantling of people. I think probably the thing I would most like people to come away from Dreamers with is this is what happens when people are not listened to. This is what happens when people feel that they have to live up to expectations that they didn't choose. A kind of image that I come back to, or not an image, but kind of a phrase that I come back to and back to and back to in Dreamers when kind of referring to the patriarchy is she didn't choose any of this. There is all this on her and she didn't get a choice. And the female rage in Dreamers is, I think, there's a lot of themes and there's a lot of different things going on with the book, but there's only one thing where I would feel like I would have failed if people hadn't gotten it. And if people don't get to the end of Dreamers and are like, good for her, then the book needed another draft. But you will. Trust me.
Because we're proud of Sam. Whatever she goes through. We're so proud of Sam.
Whatever she may or may not do.
Yes, we are proud of her. No, that's great. Do you feel like when you are writing, do these themes come naturally, or are they something that you think of early on?
They come naturally. I never go into a book with the idea of oh, this is going to be my female rage book. I often, in fact, come into a book thinking, oh, this is going to be my whatever book, and that doesn't happen. I think it's a product of just where I'm at the time, the influences that I'm taking in at the time, and also just what I think, not only where I'm at in myself, but where I'm at as regards to what I am able to actually put into words. Because there are things that I have been wanting to write about for years that I feel ready to write about, but literally do not have the words for yet. I would love to write about motherhood one day, but I know it's going to be a long, long, long time because I literally cannot symbolize it yet.
Yeah.
Or so my dad passed away when I was a teenager, and I have been, probably every book that I've ever written, I've been this is going to be my grief book, which is, that sounds like a crazy thing, but I would like to write a book about that emotion because it's been with me for a long time, and I would like to kind of feel that I had not really made something of it, but I don't know, it would just feel it would feel nice. I think I would feel very healing for me, and I actually feel at a great place with that emotion now, but it just hasn't happened yet. Maybe next time.
Yeah.
I think the themes they come as they come, sort of thing. The female rage was the last thing to come to Dreamers, but it was definitely it was the key ingredient. It's the thing that really makes the villain a villain. It was the thing that really makes Sam the hero. It was the thing that kind of really binds everything up. And it was also the thing that I had probably most wanted to write about for a long time and not felt brave enough to yet.
Yeah, I love asking, because I think some people figure out the theme in the beginning. Some find it naturally. I think it's so interesting, everyone's process. But I like how you talked about, you go in being this is going to be my grief book, but it turns out to be, something different, which I find very relatable as well. But writing is that, it is that healing process of once you do feel, like you said, in a better place with an emotion, to be able to process it through writing can not only be healing for the writer, but I feel that's why we read as readers.
Yeah,
we're reading
exactly.
for those emotions and to feel validated in our emotions and learn about other ones. And, so that's great. I always love asking about themes because it's my favorite part of the writing process.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And I know we talked about, why you went into self-publishing and making that decision. So I guess I would just like to hear from you, like, how has this self-publishing process been so far? You recently made the announcement, books coming out September of next year. How's the process been going?
Yeah, I've been really loving it. I think, it is really hard work, and there's no two ways about it, but it's work that I really like. It's work that I feel able for, and like, I love a bit of hard work, so it kind of does work for me. And the just kind of the freedom of being your own boss in that regard is, for me, just incredible and so exciting. And the freedom to be able to literally plan out your career and not kind of have to caveat with, oh, but if that book sells, if a publisher wants it, if my agent is happy to work with me on that book. Because obviously, like, there's no two ways about it. I would really like this book to do well.
Mm-hmm.
And I would really like my next book to do well, but it isn't my primary source of income. And I feel pretty realistic about the fact that while I would love to write full time, and it is probably less likely as a self-published author, it's not super likely as a traditionally published author. Mm-hmm. So at least this way, the business decisions get to be mine. The business decisions about what gets published get to be on what I think I can sell, sort of thing. And being able to sit down a couple of weeks ago with myself, and then by running kind of things past my sort of, I'm really lucky to have a great kind of official and unofficial team around me of my closest readers and my editor. And I have a really, really dear friend who works professionally in marketing, in publishing, who has essentially just kind of taken on my book as her pet project, for which I will never be able to say thank you enough. And being able to sit down with those people and be like, okay guys, these are the books that, this is what we're doing for the next couple of years, and getting to be the kind of captain of that ship was incredible. It's so exciting, and it's what I need to be able to create. Mm-hmm. I need that freedom, at least for now anyway. Probably, I do struggle, and I'm trying to be more open about it. Like, I struggle with the fact that every time I tell someone that I'm self-published, probably, more of the, let's say 70% of the time, people are like, oh, you're self-publishing, kind of like, and they kind of are very patronizing about it, and they think it's just like a little hobby, and that I must be self-publishing because the book's not very good, kind of thing. That has been like the hardest part since the announcement, but in some ways the best part, because like, I kind of had a moment recently of like, well, why should I care? Like,
right,
like, probably if you think that about my self-published book, you think that about a lot of traditionally published books as well. Like, it's been really difficult to kind of find that insecurity in myself, but also kind of great to know that it's in there, because I've been able to really challenge that. And I just kind of had the thought yesterday, it's just like, well, you know what, they're just probably going to think that whatever I do, so why should I waste my energy on that kind of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do think there's still those stigmas of self-publishing, but it's been so hopeful over the last couple of years. I mean, really the past decade, like, self-publishing has absolutely blown up. And I really do think a lot of readers are like, they're self-published girlies. They're over here just like, I want to read every self-published author, and they know the value of writers' works, and they're excited. It has been cool to see that platforms like Instagram has connected so many self-published authors with their readers, people who are genuinely excited, like, get so hyped for these books and participate in the pre-ordering. And that's just, it's really, really hopeful to see. So I love that, at the end of the day, even if there are the people who are snarky or maybe a little self-righteous. Like, you are finding your readers.
Exactly.
And Dreamers will find the people that it needs to find, which is great. Yeah. Do you have any advice for people wanting to go on the self-publishing route?
Do I have any advice? I think probably my biggest advice for any writers is probably true kind of wherever you're at, but I think particularly like can be helpful for self-published writers. There is not an external marker or moment of validation that is going to like systematically wipe away all your self-doubt. I think it's really easy to be like, oh, well, I'm going to imagine this future version of myself that's so confident, and that I could be that person if I got a book deal, or if my self-published book has this many pre-orders, or I have this many Instagram followers, or I get nominated for that award, I'm on that list, that author wants to be my friend, kind of. None of that. None of it's going to work. None of it is going to just wash away every bad feeling you've ever had about yourself. And I know this because there are like multi-best-selling, authors who everyone's like, they say I've got a new book coming out, and their publishers are like, great, let's clear a year. Like, and they feel so much self-doubt. They feel imposter syndrome. My biggest example is of, V. Schwab, who is like such a smash hit writer these days, talks a lot about how they experience a lot of self-doubt, and in every book they write, they're like, this is going to be the book no one reads, which sounds terrifying and sounds like, oh god, but actually it means that either you have two choices, and I'm not saying that it's that easy, but fundamentally you can feel terrible forever, like you can worry about it forever, or you can find something in your work or in yourself to cling on to. And it doesn't erase, every bad thing you've ever felt about yourself, but it can be a lighthouse in the storm, and it is a more realistic thing to hold on to. And it can come, and I really do mean this, it can come to mean more than the external validation ever would, because the external validation is like, it feels great for a day or two, and then it flickers out. But the things that you can find in yourself, like, those stay. Like, my thing is, I don't want to stake my self-esteem on my prose or on my plots or anything like that are so susceptible to people's opinion. But the one thing is just that you cannot deny, no matter who you are, is I work incredibly hard. And so that is my thing. And like, people will see me say this all the time, but it's like my little mantra to myself is like, I work really hard and I'm doing my best. And like, I just, like, in moments of self-doubt, like, that's what I cling on to. And that's what's real. And I think find the thing in yourself that you're gonna wrap around. Don't make it don't make it a goal, don't make it external validation. Like, what in you is going to get you through this?
I needed to hear that. I feel like I've been
I'm so sorry.
going through like the trenches of self-doubt. It comes in like waves. So thank you. I needed to hear that. I hope other people, take that advice as well, because it is important to remember that when you are being as vulnerable as you are with art and the process of writing, it's very easy to have self-doubt. So I love that you're able to like create that mantra for yourself and cling to that thing about you to, hold steadfast in it.
Exactly.
That's really great. Yeah. Well, since Dreamers is coming out next year, do you want to give a little spiel of where everyone can find you and how they can find more about your book? What am I trying to say?
You can find me on Instagram and on TikTok at Clare Robertson 17. I'm on Twitter, but updates only at Clare Robertson. I wouldn't bother. It's a terrible way to promote yourself, but it's true. It is updates only. Don't worry about it. Or you can go to my website, www.clarerobertson.co.uk, and you can read my first 2 chapters completely for free, which I think is a really handy way to get just a taste. There is a full list of trigger warnings for the book up there as well. And my debut novel, Some Advanced Notes on Practical Dreaming, is available to add on Goodreads right now, which would be pretty cool.
It would be pretty cool. You all should add it. I've added it. Thank you so much. This has truly been absolutely lovely.
Thank you so much. This has been just such a joy. I've had so much fun.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the podcast with Clare Robertson. I can't believe that we're almost done with season 1 of Pen to Pod. For the rest of December, the last 3 episodes of this podcast will be dropping, and then we will be going on a bit of a break in between season 1 and season 2 for the beginning of the year. So be sure to check out the last 3 episodes with authors like Lana Vargas, Camry Kohler, and H.M. Wolf. And if you have not listened to our backlist yet, then this winter is a great time to catch up, just in time for season 2. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and rate and like and comment wherever you're listening. I have video versions on my YouTube channel, Mick Writes, as well as on Apple and Spotify podcasts. Anytime someone rates our podcast, it is really, really helpful. So if you have a second, I would be very appreciative. Thanks again for listening, and I hope to see you soon. Bye, writers.